for such a long time, the National Party has been using the connection to the Greens as a negative for Labour. You know, if Labour gets in, those Greens will come with them, and now they want to play the card. Well, but that's New Zealand first. That's nothing to do with us. I was like, you kind of can't have it both ways, Mr. Luxon. If you're going to lumber the Greens into Pāti Māori in with Labour saying that's a bad thing, then you have to accept that we're going to lumber in ACT and New Zealand first with you. And New Zealand first at the moment, well, she's not looking too good, shall we? What's going on? Should we go straight to the story, shall we?
Yeah, go on.
Let's do that. Here's the TV3 news story tonight about Winston Peters and this is actually a really serious issue. And there are some really serious consequences from what Winston Peters has done, which we'll show you shortly. But let's have a look at the story first of all.
Winston Peters is doubling down on a claim former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern concealed details about the Christchurch terror attack.
On social media, he said the country only discovered yesterday that her office had received information about the attacks before it happened, when in reality, Ardern released that detail 2 days after the attack.
The Islamic community slammed it as political posturing. But Peters' potential coalition partners are refusing to comment. Political reporter Amelia Wade has more.
It's funny that, refusing to comment now, but want to comment about everything to do with the Greens and Te Pāti Māori when it reflected on Labour. But when New Zealand First reflects on them, stum.
I bet it's been concealed from him in the same way that his car keys are concealed from him after 6 o'clock in the evening.
Possibly.
It was one of our darkest days, marked by political unity.
We want to ensure that there's no doubt that this is a unified political response beyond politics.
Then Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters stood by Jacinda Ardern in that response. Until now, the ongoing coronial inquest into the attacks yesterday heard evidence about the gunman's manifesto being sent to the PM's office. Peters followed that up with a tweet claiming, "We waited until today to find out for the first time that Ardern received information about the terrorist attack before the massacre took place." But
Now, firstly, quickly, let's just look at that tweet. Because he's going to try and move the goalpost shortly to say, well, what I meant to say was, and you know when explaining is losing, what I meant to say was, but it's very, very clear in his first tweet. What he's talking about is we haven't heard this information before. Jacinda Ardern hid it. That's very clear. But of course, as the news has already said, within 48 hours, Jacinda Ardern from the podium said that they had a manifesto come in. And just remember this as well. What is he implying if it was the first time it had been released? Because remember, the information from the shooter got to them 9 minutes before the shooting. What is he implying that they would have, could have, should have done if they had have ignored it 9 minutes out, which they didn't do, Chewy?
I assume that he's boasting about how quick he can get from Wellington to Christchurch on horseback.
Yeah.
That he could have saved this whole thing from happening.
Yeah. All right. So let's keep going and have a look through the story.
Place. But Peters got this totally wrong, because just 2 days after the attack, Ardern told New Zealand,
"I was one of more than 30 recipients of a manifesto that was mailed out 9 minutes before the attack took place."
It was also in the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the attacks.
Right.
This is there black and white. It's obviously he hasn't even read the Royal Commission. And that, for a senior statement.
The PM's office has urged Peters to remove his tweet and post a correction, but Peters instead chose to double down, posting late last night. For those political apologists and feckless media, not once were we transparently informed of this information. To excuse it because it was known at a public press conference is as bizarre as it is biased.
So doesn't this just have, remember there's a certain journalist also based in Wellington, I'll put journalist quotes marks, who's like, if he doesn't give absolute permission himself, then it's bad. It's like, I guess what Winston's saying is, I needed to have a call immediately and go through all the details. I shouldn't have had to find out from a press conference. But remember what he said was, this is the first time. Right, remember that was the first tweet. This is the first time. And now he's saying, well, a public press conference wasn't enough information. So that means this is at least the second time, Mr. Peters, because you're acknowledging now that it was done at a public press conference. That would have been the first time. Sorry, Chewie.
Does anyone really believe that a press conference that both Jacinda and Winston were at, that Winston walked on not knowing at all what Jacinda was going to talk about? Is that what he's saying?
I don't know. Or maybe, but see, Keith, look, you know me, I'm not trying to defend him, but the press conference where Jacinda announced it, maybe he wasn't at that one. It only showed her. He was at the one on the first day. He may not have been there. He may. But the other option, as says, is dementia or lying.
Yeah.
You know, that age.
Yeah,
people,
it makes no sense. I do not believe that the Deputy Prime Minister was outside of the loop at all.
Yeah.
This is showboating.
Yeah, I know, 100%. And it's pitching, and I'll just be blunt with you, it is pitching to the new base he's got, which is full of cookers. Let's just be honest about it. That's where it's gone.
It's showboating off a massacre.
Yeah. Horrible.
Peters then tweeted this afternoon that his initial comment was about the location of the attacks.
So there's the goalpost being shifted. He's now saying, oh, no. I'm not saying the information didn't come through ever before. What I'm saying is they didn't give the locations out, and that was in the email. And it's like, well, that's not what you said, Mr. Peters. So he's trying to walk it back, but he's refusing to actually apologise and take it down.
What is more important, to learn the lessons of March 15th or political posturing for a short-term media burst? I think that kind of political tweeting, you can leave it in Trump's America.
But in Christopher Luxon's New Zealand, where he's trying to form a government that may very well involve New Zealand first, there was a deafening silence. David Seymour refused to say a peep, and Peters wouldn't be interviewed.
Fair enough, David Seymour not saying a peep, because, if it was up to David Seymour, he wouldn't be involved with Winston at all. So I actually think that's fair enough. David doesn't have to say anything. Luxon, on the other hand, very different story, I think. Chewie, what do you think?
Yep, absolutely.
All
right.
The last Kiwis have heard from the man about to lead them was a tweet about the All Blacks last night, after saying yesterday morning all was well with coalition talks.
I think it's important we get a foundation of good chemistry, of good trust, of good relationships in place.
And he's requiring a lot of trust from New Zealanders in this vacuum of silence.
Now, I don't necessarily want to play the second story twice, but there was an interesting angle from TVNZ because this happened yesterday afternoon, and guess where the Luxons were last night?
It was at Winston Peters' Auckland home that he opened his door for a private dinner, playing host to the Luxons. One news understands Amanda Luxon came bearing flowers. And while we don't know exactly what was on the menu, you can safely assume there was plenty of politics.
So I just thought that was an interesting little dynamic there about where the Luxons were last night. It doesn't mean anything to do with the actual, the actual situation, but it's not like they haven't been near him or available to talk to him. I'm just going to scroll forward a bit here because I want to show you some of the other commentary that's come out from other people within the party who would be in the coalition who are publicly distancing themselves.
Others did weigh in.
The information that he's put up that is still as of yet uncorrected is simply not true.
Should Winston Peters take the tweet down, Simeon?
I mean, look, ultimately that's up to him. He's the leader of the New Zealand First Party.
Given Mr. Peters...
So, feckless. Speaking of feckless, which is the word that he used, Simeon's unclear, doesn't want to commit to whether Winston Peters should take a lie down that is causing harm, and I'll show you shortly how it's causing harm. But firstly, Chewie, your thoughts, sir?
Look, I'm always here to see Simeon blaze a brave and spine-filled path to glory.
Climb out of his pothole.
He'd absolutely be if one of the Greens went off, he'd be calling for their head, like Labour should get rid of them, that sort of thing. And you're absolutely right. The next 3 years are going to be 3 years of comparison of like, but when you were in this position, you said this.
Yep.
And it's just going to be like shouting it down a hallway. They don't even see it.
Now, Chewie, my friend, you're off the mighty Twitter, or you're taking a break from the mighty Twitter, but I'll show you one thing that actually happened. So this is the tweet that Winston Peters put out, and guess what happened? The lovely Twitter users got a warning added to the tweet. So this is a screenshot of his tweet, right? So I haven't, it's not actually his tweet, it's a screenshot, but you can see that after this original tweet, Twitter, because you can kind of update and help other people's tweets, have put up a message saying Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern had already publicly confirmed on March 16, 2019 that the Prime Minister's office was sent the manifesto of Christchurch shooters minutes before the attack that was widely reported at the time. So Winston was fact-checked by Twitter users. I guess that's a bit like old man shouts at cloud, young generation pull them up. But this is the one serious, it's all serious, but this is the more serious bit. This is from Byron Clark's Twitter feed. This is now what a certain sector of society are doing with Winston's tweet. Byron says, you could probably have guessed this would happen, but counterspin media are using Winston Peters' post to further propagate their view that the terror attack in Christchurch was a false flag to disarm the populace. Peters knows that this is the audience he's dog whistling to. So here's the actual, here's the Winston Peters tweet, and down the bottom I'll read it for people who are in the audio podcast. Counterspin Media has said, beware of the cover-ups. By now many will be aware that Winston Peters has released somewhat of a please explain over foreknowledge of the March 15, 2019 attack in Christchurch. There is of course an inquiry, yada yada, goes on, it cuts off. So this is why it's dangerous. Yeah, it's dangerous because people who are choosing and wanting to sow discontent, people who are claiming revolting, disgusting things like it was a false flag operation, are using Winston Peters' words, his tweet, to use as confirmation bias to say, see, we told you so, and the one honest politician is now talking about it. That's why it's dangerous, Chewy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't know. Does he know what he's doing? Does it matter to him? Is it just a game to him?
I think it's more that he is one of the most arrogant men in the world, is that now he's being called on it. He just actually refuses to back down. So I don't know if it's calculated or not, but I think that now that he's made a mistake, it's the arrogance of the man to actually refuse to back down. That's what I think it's turned into.
I mean, he was fine when it was just garden variety racism, right?
Yeah.
Now it's just a whole nother thing. But you know, this is what people voted for, and this is what Luxon left the door open to.
Yep. And this is actually because of it's because of Luxon. As soon as Luxon ruled him in, they went on a surge, and now they're there. And I've seen some of the chats going past from you guys. Now they're there, and their cabinet, the New Zealand First cabinet, is full of cookers, according to one of the texts that flew past while we were playing it. But giving fodder to groups like Counterspin to sow the narrative that the New Zealand government was somewhat responsible for shooting and killing 51 people just so they could take guns off people, that's what Winston Peters is aiding and abetting with this tweet.